afternoon, Chairman Staffstrom, Ranking Member Representative Fishbein, and other distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. For the record, I'm State Senator Rob Sampson, and I'm here today in opposition to House Bills 5436 and House Bill 5043. Across most of the country, states are moving toward greater recognition of constitutional rights. Many states have actually adopted constitutional carry because they trust their citizens and recognize that the right to keep and bear arms belongs to free Americans. Here in Connecticut, however, it appears the Democratic majority seems determined to move in the opposite direction. Instead of trusting our citizens, these bills treat them with suspicion. Instead of focusing on criminals, they focus on the people who already follow the law. And that raises an important question for this body. Who exactly does the majority believe they are regulating? Because it is certainly not criminals. Criminals do not apply for permits, they do not pass background checks, and they certainly do not follow regulatory definitions that are written here at the state capitol. The people you are regulating are the very people we are supposed to represent. Veterans, hunters, sportsmen, small business owners, our neighbors. These are law-abiding citizens who simply want the ability to protect themselves and their families. So I would ask the proponents of these bills very directly, who exactly are you trying to stop with these laws? Because the people who will comply with them are not criminals. They are citizens who already follow the law. Let us also be honest about what these bills actually do. One of them targets pretty much ordinary semi-automatic pistols. The most common example would be something like a Glock handgun, as most of the other folks testifying have already described. These are among the most common firearms in America. They are used by police departments, security professionals, and most importantly, they are owned by millions of responsible Americans. The other bill goes even further by attempting to ban parts that are not even firearms. I fail to see how exactly banning non-firearms makes anyone safer. Because the reality is that none of this will make any one of us safer or stop criminals. These firearms and components already exist by the millions across the country. They are legal in most states, and they will remain widely available. Passing bans here in Connecticut does not make them disappear. It simply burdens the law-abiding citizens that happen to live here. Supporters of these bills argue that a lawful firearm might be modified illegally. But that logic has no limit. Sawed-off shotguns have been illegal for decades, yet we still sell ordinary shotguns. Why? Because common sense says that we punish illegal conduct rather than banning lawful products. So if a lawful object can be banned because someone might misuse it, where does that lack of logic end? Bleach.
Thank you, Senator.
Pipe bombs.
Questions? Yes, Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Chairman Staffstrom. Senator Sampson, it is great to see you back. I hope you're happy being back before your old committee, the Judiciary Committee. And I heard your testimony from my office. And my heartbreak really with all this, because now after all the decades that I've been lucky enough to serve in the legislature, it's like there's always an annual gun day, and I think that we're missing opportunities each and every year to actually reduce crime, and I guess it's just easier to go after an object and make that the enemy, as opposed to all the behavior that goes behind a criminal activity. But with this instance where they're saying, oh, don't worry about you lawful gun owners, and they're really just blatantly saying we're going after Glock, the manufacturer. And so there's no hiding the goal of the legislature, of the legislation, in that we want to change that manufacturer's behavior and the construction of its guns. And so by moving forward with this, that'll force this company to change the kind of guns that it sells in Connecticut. And somebody behind you keeps shaking their head, but that's what I've heard, and I'm not an idiot. So that's what I'm hearing here over and over and over from the people in favor of this legislation. By going down this road, do we actually create an environment in Connecticut that endangers people's Second Amendment rights?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and I'm very glad to be back. I mean, one of the side benefits of not being a member of the committee is I get to sit before you guys and testify, which I really appreciate the opportunity. the beginning of your question, actually, to me, is more important than the end, which is about the motivation behind why this legislation is before us. And I know we have to be careful about talking about the motives of our colleagues here in the legislature, but I don't know if there's another way to look at this other than the majority trying to make itself very clearly hostile to a portion of the population of this great state, and simply because of their desire to own firearms and express their right to keep and bear arms. To me, that's what it means when you come back year after year after year. I mean, allegedly, if you're trying to solve a problem that's associated with firearms, why does it take you every year you have to come back with a new bill? And I mean, are you just throwing darts at a dartboard to decide what new regulation you want to create? I don't think that your track record says that you've got any success, frankly, because if you have to come back every year with some new idea on how to do it, it shows that the previous ideas have failed. And yet none of those things have been repealed along the way, even though they probably should have. Most of this legislation is really irrelevant anyway, because the items in question are going to be available whether these laws pass or not. And criminals are the ones that are going to use these things, or rather misuse these things. The law-abiding people that actually pay taxes and go through the permitting process and keep up their pistol permit and go to a gun store to buy their firearms lawfully and so forth, they're going to comply with every ridiculous law this legislature passes. And ultimately, that's all these bills do, is inconvenience those folks. The criminals that are going to, use whatever items that they come across, whether they're firearms or something else illegally, they're still going to do that. And if somebody has their heart set on going to get an automatic weapon to commit their crime, they'll find a way to get one in another state. They'll travel across state lines to do that. If somebody wants to saw off a shotgun, like I mentioned, they will do it. If someone wants to modify a pistol, they will do it. There are going to be millions of Glock pistols in existence, whether this bill passes or not. Many of them are going to remain in Connecticut, whether this happens or not. So this is really just an assault on gun ownership, and it is a way for the majority to message that people that enjoy firearms and their rights are not welcome in Connecticut.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily majority, minority. It's certainly the group that favors gun control, pushes this legislation. And I think there's people in both parties on both sides of this issue, although it predominates in one area or the other. But I very much share your concerns about how our state approaches this. I've told people over and over again, we're one of the top 3 states in the country as far as gun control goes. If that's what you want to plant your flag in, it's like we're already so super tough, and we're just making it tougher and tougher and tougher. But thank you for taking the time to come and testify, and thank you very much, Chairman Staffstrom.
Further questions or comments? Representative Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Senator. Nice to see you again, and I do appreciate us being able to have that exchange instead of me looking at the back of your head and going down there and talking to you. You know, last year we had FIRA, the Firearm Responsibility Act with the manufacturers. I believe you at least submitted written testimony with regard to that. You may have testified in person.
Oh, yeah. I did.
And that was characterized as a attack on Glock, essentially, and I think that was the position that was taken. Is it fair to say that was the rally cry last year, was that was going to solve this problem, so to speak? Is that fair to say?
Right. Well, I think every year that we are back in the legislature, and good afternoon, Representative, delighted to see you as well. I think every year that we come back here and yet there's another gun control bill or more than one on an agenda, and we've come to joke about Gun Day, right? There's Gun Day every year, which tells us that, the problem's not being solved. No one's actually attempting to solve the problem. All they're trying to do is make sure that there's a day every year where this legislature shows off that they're hostile to gun owners in the state. And I think today is that day this year.
Now, you mentioned very early in your remarks about other states. Are you aware that California has passed a few years ago, I believe it was, 3 to 5 years ago, a similar legislation to what's before us here today?
Yes, when it comes to the convertible pistol legislation, I am aware.
Okay. And, I happened to access the website of the California Attorney General, and he or she. I have no idea what the gender is of that individual.
Knowing California, they may not either.
They,
All right, guys, we're gonna get back to the bill before us. We're gonna knock off the snide comments, and we're gonna remind folks that, frankly, this start of this exchange is exactly why, starting next session, I believe this committee is actually going to go back to the way the rules require, which is that legislators are allowed to testify, but they will go at the very end of our agenda. Legislators have an opportunity to debate bills on the floor, to discuss bills on the floor, or better yet, legislators who have relationships with folks can pick up the phone or make an appointment to see them in their office to discuss legislations before a particular committee, rather than having to testify on the particular bills. If you have questions that this particular witness can answer, I will allow questions on the bills. What I'm not going to allow are extended political statements or debate on the bills back and forth between members, which should be reserved for the floor, so that we can get to the remaining 40-some-odd folks who have patiently waited their chance to testify today, when we can take this conversation up afterwards.
And Mr. Chairman, I await the debate on the change of rules next session, but this is this session. So, with that being said, the Attorney General of the state of California has said that California has one of the lowest rates of firearm mortality in the country, 44th out of 50. Only Hawaii, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, New York, and Connecticut have lower firearm mortality rates. So now we have a state, California, that's already had this law in place for in excess of 3 years, but we have a lower mortality rate than they do. So would you like to speak to the difference there, or do you know? I mean, you did mention other states.
I'm not really familiar with the statistics, Representative, but I can tell you that if there is a correlation between the gun control legislation passed in Connecticut or California with the mortality rate, I'd be very surprised. I don't believe one thing has anything to do with another. As I mentioned, most of this legislation is around the edges of the existence of firearms and crime. It is really nuisance legislation that diminishes the rights of the citizens of the states that live where it's being passed, but it doesn't stop criminals from engaging in criminal activity, robbery, murder, and so on. So those statistics for me are not really related to these particular policies.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for this witness? Representative Howard?
Thank you, Senator. Great to see you. You know, one of the things when people testify, I like to try to draw on their experience. You've been in this building 15 years, right? Or roughly that, or significantly longer than me. You mentioned the shotgun thing. I actually talked with some folks about that earlier. My concern is, look, the sawed-off shotgun's illegal. With a hacksaw, you can modify that, right? And I brought that up because what I was talking to them about, and this is what I want to ask you, is today it's fairly simple to modify a Glock pistol. If this legislation passes and Glock changes their manufacturing and makes theirs more difficult to do, it's my belief that people who want to do ill are going to find a way to modify a different type of pistol. And we'll be back here again, to use your terms, in a subsequent gun day to outlaw those pistols. And pretty soon, we'll be outlawing all the pistols and probably the shotguns as well. As someone who's been in this building for 15 years, that is my concern. Do you think that is a legitimate concern?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for the question. The fact of the matter is, as I mentioned, these regulations are done in a certain way so they never achieve their stated goal. And if you never achieve your stated goal, you're able to come back year after year with more regulations and more impediments to freedom. And you're absolutely correct. If this passes and becomes law, several things will happen. First off, the existing Glock firearms that exist in Connecticut and throughout the country are still going to exist, and they will still be used by criminals if they choose to modify them in the way that the bill describes. They will not be used by law-abiding people who are very concerned about maintaining their right to bear arms, maintaining a clean record so they can hold on to their pistol permit, etc. Regulating objects is ridiculous. People can use different objects for harm or good. A firearm is a tool, much like a hammer. You can use a hammer to hammer a nail, or you could hit somebody with it. And to regulate the hammer is pointless. Guns are much the same. Automobiles. We've seen all sorts of terrible atrocities committed with random other objects. And when you start to limit the available objects to criminals, they just choose different objects. That's all. But meanwhile, what you're doing is you're telling the law-abiding people that need these tools to defend themselves and their families that they have less options. A few years ago, we banned large capacity magazines in this state, for example. And to me, it was one of the most ridiculous things on earth, because I've always asked myself, does a criminal, before he's about to go in and rob a store, count the bullets he's putting in his gun and stop at 10? It's absurd to even suggest that they would. But a law-abiding citizen who's very concerned with keeping themselves clean and above board and not having a criminal record, they're going to take every precaution, right? So that's the guy who's going to be in a situation defending himself against the criminals who have God knows what. And they're limited in their ability to defend themselves. That's why these bills are so unreasonable from a common sense perspective. They limit the rights of the good people that would actually prevent crime, that would go out of their way to stop crime, and certainly to use firearms to protect and defend themselves and their family and maybe other innocent citizens. And instead, they do nothing to stop the criminals.
Senator, it's always great to have you back here, and it's great to have you on our side on this bill if it moves through. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you for the opportunity to answer some questions and have a voice in this committee.
Further questions on the bill?